NDE 1, I'm not sure if this is a near-death experience or not. However, it is very strange and I'll just let you be the judge. In 1995, I was in labor with my son. I was in my hospital room. My husband and a nurse were with me. I suddenly became very ill. I was hot and cold and clammy all at the same time. I felt a lot of pain, though it wasn't contractions. I hurt everywhere. I became very nauseous. I felt so strange. I actually thought I was dying. I told my nurse that something was wrong. I remember her practically on top of me telling me to look at her and to breathe. I tried, but I felt so sick. I said, I can't, and then there was total darkness. Suddenly I was enveloped in a bright, white light. I felt perfectness. It was the perfect temperature. The light was bright, but it was not hot on my skin like sunlight, nor did it hurt my eyes. I was very aware of the transition from pain to feeling wonderful. I felt peace, great love, joy. It seemed all my questions were answered. It's hard to describe the feeling of total utopia. I then realized that the light seemed to be shining through walls of brick glass windows. I heard laughter and looked down to see a little child smiling up at me. The little girl seemed to be about 4 years old. She had dark hair in a page boy style and the most beautiful eyes I have ever seen. She didn't speak, but she seemed to convey the message that all was well and that she loved me. I was suddenly back in my hospital bed. I heard my husband asking the nurse what had happened and she said that my blood pressure had completely bottomed out. I had my son later that day and everything was fine. I began trying to find out what I had experienced. I read a book about NDE that mentioned that experiencers have sometimes seen their future children during an NDE. I found the book they referred to. There were some stories somewhat similar to mine. I have had 2 more sons since my experience. I have longed for the child I saw. I feel that she was meant to come to me. However, as I have a total of 6 sons and 3 daughters, my husband is unwilling. It's been 7 years since I had the experience and I'm still seeking answers. NDE 2, this is my near-death experience. It was many years ago. I was in the hospital in Chicago. I was dying of blood clots in my lungs from smoking and taking birth control pills. We did not have the information that we have now. I was in great pain and the doctor on call at the hospital's emergency department thought I had pleurisy. I was sent home. Hours went by and I could not breathe. I had a friend drive me back to the hospital. I told the attendant at the desk to admit me, but she would not. I then sat in a chair in the emergency room and put my head on the shoulder of a stranger sitting next to me. I wanted to die due to the pain. When I woke up I was in a bed in the hospital. Before I did awake, all I can remember is I was in a white tunnel. The light was very bright. I was calling out for my mother. I could only whisper for her. Then a voice, very soothing and comforting. The voice said, "Don't talk, save your energy." I was awake and scared. I then called for my mother again. I remember it was hard for me to talk. The voice got somewhat louder and said the same thing to me, "Don't talk, save your energy." I noticed at the end of the tunnel a tiny figure. Again, I tried to call for my mother. I heard the voice again. It went on for a long time. As I spoke, the figure became bigger and bigger. When I awoke, my mother was standing at the foot of my bed. I still wonder to this day if it was her voice, but the voice was a man's voice. There was no doctor in the room at the time I woke. I kept it to myself for years, because I didn't want anyone to think me crazy. Can you help me with this? NDE 3, I was in a car crash and catapulted into the air about 30 feet high, and landed about 50 feet away from the bike. I wasn't wearing a helmet and I landed on my head. In the accident, I fractured my skull and lost all vital signs. Most of what happened from then on, I can't remember clearly. What I am told is that one of the two bikes riding with us also hit the truck. The bike that didn't hit had two close friends on it. They ran down the road and stopped traffic. If they weren't there, we would have probably been run over by the next car to come around the corner. The first car to come stopped and helped us. In it were two off-duty police officers. Ironically, one of them used to be a paramedic. She resuscitated me and saved my life. She pounded on my chest so hard she fractured one of my ribs. We were all transported to the hospital. After being resuscitated, I was awake and began talking. Even at the hospital I was awake for most of the time. I don't remember gaining consciousness until hours after I had been in the hospital though. What I remember are flashing colored lights, probably those of the rescue and police cars. I remember seeing a girl being put on a stretcher from an aerial view. It was probably me seeing myself since I was the only female in the accident. Strangely, I also faintly remember my neck being adjusted when I was being put on the stretcher, which took about 3 seconds. The first time I remember being awake in the hospital, I asked the nurse why I was there. She explained to me that I had just been in an accident and all of a sudden I thought, oh yeah, and remembered all the details of the accident that I remember now. What makes this so strange for me is that I know, by hearing through others that were there, that I had been awake at the scene of the accident and also for an hour while I was getting tested at the hospital. But, when I regained consciousness, I felt like I had just woken up from a sleep that was so deep and comfortable that it was eerie and frightening.